Hello everyone and welcome back to Nate the Hoof Guy. Today's video is a big one. We've got 3 different trims to take a look at today. First up, we have got a cow with a puncture wound on her left front foot. We've got to take a look at. Then we've got a cow with an ulcer on her left rear foot. And following that, we've got another cow with a whiteline lesion on her left front foot. So enough of the talking, let's get started with our puncture cow. So you can see on this first foot, we've got about a 1-inch long, irregularly shaped cut in the sole of this foot. And the way that I know that this is a puncture is that there are no lesions that look like this at all. Typically, when we have if it were to be a sole ulcer or anything like that in that region, it'll be a circular type lesion. This is clearly some type of puncture. And I can tell that there's some seepage here. That means that we've got some damage to that underlying corium, so we need to investigate this further. Trimming around punctures can be kind of tricky sometimes because you don't get good separation, especially with fresh cases like this. You don't get good separation of that horn underneath, so it's kind of tricky working away the loose stuff without damaging any of that corium underneath. You just got to take your time and do the best you can. Try to get away all the jagged edges from the puncture itself so that it can heal. Whenever I come across a puncture like this, I always tell the farmer what's going on, because if a situation like this can happen to this cow, there could be something out there and this could happen to another cow. As far as pinpointing it, it can be a little more difficult. If it's a nail or a screw or something like that that gets stuck in a cow's foot, it's pretty easy to pinpoint where that may have happened. In a situation like this, with a jagged piece or a jagged cut like that, it could have been a piece of steel somewhere. We're going to have to walk the barns, walk the paths, try to figure out where that could have happened and eliminate that so it doesn't happen to another cow. Much like I would if I was treating an abscess or an ulcer, I'm going to put a rubber block on that other claw, just going to elevate this injured claw off the ground, give it time to rest and to heal to get that area cleaned up. Here you can see what that wound actually looks like. What I've got to do now is just thin out the margins around that just so there's not any sharp edges that could irritate this lesion. And then I'm going to wrap it with salicylic acid and this foot will be done. Moving on now to cow number 2 with a sole ulcer on her medial claw on her left rear foot. Now typically ulcers are going to show up on that lateral claw. This one happens to be on the medial. As I begin removing large chunks of hoof here, you'll notice one of the telltale symptoms of a sole ulcer, and that is these really deep heels on these cows. The reason that happens is because when that ulcer is forming in that foot, cow begins to favor that foot and she'll put more pressure on her toes, less on her heels. That's going to reduce the rate of wear on the heels. They're going to get really thick, and that's why we see that as a symptom. that's going to be enough with the knife for now. Let's get the grinder out and shape this foot up. So you might be asking yourself, how does an ulcer like this go unnoticed long enough for those heels to get that thick? And the thing with ulcers is, believe it or not, they're really easy for that cow to hide. That discomfort, a lot of times she can just change the way she walks, and that's going to be able to disguise the fact that that ulcer is there. You might notice a little limp every now and then, but then she'll walk normal. She kind of figures out how to walk without causing pain to that. Doesn't mean that that ulcer's gone, just means it's hidden. Here you can see that piece of hoof that I removed, and you can actually see where that ulcer is and where it's created a hole in that sole. That's from, as that ulcer begins to bleed into that sole, you get a spot that's got poor consistency. You create poor horn there, so that poor horn is just basically flakes away, is easily attacked by bacteria, and you end up with a literal hole in the sole from that. So got all this removed now. I'm going to get some more of this cleaned up. We'll swing in, get a block on this other claw, swing in there and give you a look at what this ulcer looks like now. It's actually been healing quite a bit on its own. It's not all the way there yet, but it's made a lot of progress. So we just got to finish this up and speed it along. When you zoom in here and take a look, you can see almost all of that sole has replaced itself. We just got a little tiny bit there left to heal and a little bit of loose horn around that I'm going to remove yet. But for the most part, this foot's looking good. No need to wrap this up. I'm just going to clean up a little bit of this loose stuff around it, and then we'll put this foot down and move on to our last case, a white line on a left front foot. Interesting little side note for today's video. All three of these trims were on separate farms, but all three of these cows managed to make it into the chute without me noticing that they had a problem. Even though that I'm trained to watch for it, and even though I try to do it every single time, all three of these cows managed to hide their lameness until I began working on the foot. That's why they all look like these trims have been were started already when I turned the camera on. It's because they were. I didn't notice until I started trimming on them. I'm like, hey, wait a second, we've got a problem here, and I turned that camera on. What we're dealing with here, we've got a white line lesion in this cow, and what that is basically is when we get a perforation between that outside wall and that sole layer in the white line, that's the layer of the junction between those two, get a little perforation in there, and what happens is bacteria is able to enter that, and it infects the underlying corium, the layer that produces the new horn for that foot. So what we've got to do now is remove all of this loose stuff, expose the area that's become infected so it can heal and begin to produce new good quality horn again. One interesting thing with white line lesions, you never really know how much loose horn you're going to get when you start working on these. So as you can see with this one, we remove some, there's still more to go. You'd be amazed at how much we have to actually take off on this particular foot. I get questions quite a bit about whether or not this process is painful for the cow. The lesions themselves, the part that we're trying to fix, that is painful. But when it comes to trimming this loose horn away, if we're careful about it, it really shouldn't. It's much like trimming our fingernails. You can see here, I've actually unclamped her foot to remove that loose horn in between her claws there, and she didn't move around at all. If she wanted to, she could have moved her foot around all she wanted right there, but she didn't. So just more proof that if you do this carefully, you don't cause her any more discomfort than you really have to. I'll bet when I started this trim, you didn't think I'd have to remove this much, did you? I didn't either, though, so. We'll zoom in close here and give you a good shot of the lesion itself. That dark area is the lesion. The area around it, the yellowish area, is actually new horn that's trying to cover up and fill in the injured area. Up above here, you can see it's still kind of soft, that new horn layer. So I'm going to put a block on that other claw, much like I did before, give that area time to rest and become thick enough to bear weight again. If you're wondering why I don't put the block on at the beginning of the trim, this girl was a perfect reason why I don't. I had to remove some horn along that interdigital cleft area in between her claws. Makes it difficult with that block in the way. So I wait till the end. That way I know I can do all my knife work obstruction free. The white powder that I'm applying now is salicylic acid, and what that does is if there's any bacteria that might cause digital dermatitis on that lesion itself, it'll kill that, as well as give her a little bit of pain relief. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. It was a long one, and if you made it to the end, I'm going to reward you with some cool shots that I took at one of my pasture herds. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one.